The gunshot that shattered the saloon window missed Sarah Mitchell's head by 3 inches, and she knew in that instant that running to Wyoming territory had been either the smartest or the stupidest thing she had ever done in her 22 years of living. Glass rained down on the bar as men dove for cover, whiskey bottles crashing to the floor. Sarah pressed herself against the wall near the staircase, her carpetbag clutched to her chest, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. The year was 1876, and Redemption Creek was supposed to be her sanctuary, not another nightmare. She had left St. Louis 3 weeks ago with nothing but the clothes on her back and $47 sewn into her petticoat, fleeing a marriage arrangement to a man twice her age who had already buried 3 wives under mysterious circumstances. "Everyone stay down." The voice cut through the chaos like a blade through butter, calm and commanding. Sarah turned her head and saw him for the first time, a tall man in dust-covered denim and a black hat, moving with the fluid grace of someone who had faced death before and found it unremarkable. He had positioned himself by the broken window, his pistol drawn but pointed at the ceiling. "It's just drunk Pete shooting at shadows again. Nobody's trying to kill anyone today." The statement proved accurate when an elderly man's voice called out from the street, slurred and apologetic. "Sorry, folks. Thought I saw a rattlesnake." "Pete, get yourself home before Sheriff Morgan throws you in a cell for the night," the tall man called back, his voice firm but not unkind. He holstered his weapon and turned, and Sarah found herself staring into the bluest eyes she had ever seen, the color of a summer sky just after dawn. His face was weathered by sun and wind, probably 30 years old or thereabouts, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of stubble, and a mouth that looked like it smiled easily, though it was set in a serious line now. Those eyes swept the room, checking for injuries, and landed on her. They stayed there, something shifting in his expression that Sarah could not quite name. Recognition, perhaps, though they had never met, or maybe just concern for a stranger who looked as terrified as she felt. "You hurt, miss." He crossed the room to her, his spurs jingling softly with each step. Up close, he was even taller than she had thought, and she was not a short woman. "No, I'm fine." Sarah's voice came out steadier than she expected. "Thank you for your concern. You are new in town." It was not a question. In a place like Redemption Creek, population maybe 300 souls, everyone knew everyone. "Just arrived on the afternoon stage." "Yes, about an hour ago." She loosened her grip on the carpetbag slightly. The other patrons were picking themselves up, brushing off glass and laughing now that the danger had passed. The bartender, a rotund man with impressive whiskers, was already sweeping up the broken window. "I was hoping to inquire about lodging when the excitement started. Mrs. Henderson runs a boarding house 2 streets over, clean rooms and decent food." He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away, but somehow she could not. "Though if you do not mind my saying, you look like you have been traveling hard. When's the last time you ate something that was not jerky or hardtack?" Sarah could not remember, actually. "Yesterday morning, perhaps?" Time had blurred together on the stagecoach, every jolt and bump another mile between her and St. Louis, between her and Uncle Herbert, who had sold her future for a business partnership. "I'm fine, really. I just need to find the boarding house and rest. Lily." The man called to a woman emerging from the back room, a pretty brunette in a green dress. "Can you fix a plate for this lady, on my account?" "Sure thing, Cole." Lily smiled warmly at Sarah. "Come sit down, honey. You look ready to drop." "I cannot impose," Sarah protested, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl that made Lily laugh. "It is no imposition when Cole Bridger offers to pay. He owns half the cattle in this valley anyway." Lily guided Sarah to a table away from the broken window. "I'm Lily Chen. My father owns this saloon. Cole Bridger. Sarah filed the name away as she let herself be led to the table. She should not accept charity from strangers, but her funds were limited and she needed to make every penny count until she found work. Sarah Mitchell, and thank you truly. Cole tipped his hat to her and turned to leave, but Lily called out, "You are not staying, Cole. I thought you came in for that meeting with Tom." "Tom can wait. I should check on Pete, make sure he gets home before he shoots something important." But Cole glanced back at Sarah one more time before he walked out, and she felt that look all the way to her bones. Lily brought her a plate of beef stew and fresh bread, and Sarah ate slowly, trying to maintain some dignity even though she wanted to devour it like a wolf. The food was good, hearty, and hot, and she felt strength seeping back into her limbs with each bite. "So what brings you to Redemption Creek?" Lily sat across from her, chin propped on her hand. "We do not get many single women passing through unless they are heading to one of the mining camps further north, and you do not look like that type." Sarah had prepared a story during the long journey, something bland and unremarkable. "I'm looking for work. I heard there might be opportunities out here for someone with teaching experience." "You are a teacher." Lily's face lit up. "Oh, Mrs. Patterson is going to love you. She has been trying to wrangle someone educated to help with the school for months. We have got about 15 children in town and the surrounding ranches, and she has been handling them all herself. The woman is a saint, but she is also 73 years old and her eyes are going." Hope flickered in Sarah's chest, fragile as a candle flame. "Do you think she would meet with me? Meet with you?" "Honey, she will probably drag you to the schoolhouse tonight if she hears you are here." Lily laughed. "Finish your food and I will take you to Mrs. Henderson's. Once you are settled, we can walk over to see Mrs. Patterson. She lives just behind the church." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them away furiously. 3 weeks of fear and uncertainty, sleeping in uncomfortable stagecoach stations and cheap hotels, always looking over her shoulder in case Uncle Herbert had sent someone after her. And now, maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could stop running. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means to me." Lily reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I think I might. You have got that look about you, like you are running from something. I came here 5 years ago with my father for similar reasons. Redemption Creek is a good place for fresh starts." By the time the sun began its descent toward the mountains, Sarah had secured a room at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, met with an enthusiastic Mrs. Patterson who practically hired her on the spot, and been introduced to half the town. Redemption Creek was small but prosperous, with a main street lined with well-maintained buildings, a general store, a blacksmith, a doctor's office, and even a small church with a white steeple. The surrounding valley was lush with grass, perfect cattle country, and several large ranches sprawled across the landscape. Cole Bridger's ranch, she learned, was the largest. He had come to Wyoming 8 years ago with nothing but a horse and determination, worked as a hand for old Samuel Garrett, and when Samuel died without heirs, he had left the entire spread to Cole. Some people had grumbled about it, but Cole had proven himself a fair employer and a good neighbor, and the grumbling had faded. "He is a good man, Mrs. Henderson said as she showed Sarah to her room on the second floor. It was small but clean, with a bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. "Quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but he will help anyone who needs it. Last winter, when the Johnsons lost their barn in a fire, Cole had his men rebuild it before the week was out. Did not ask for a penny in return." Sarah set her carpet bag on the bed and looked out the window. The town was settling into evening, lamps being lit in windows, people heading home for supper. It looked peaceful, normal. Everything St. Louis was not, at least not in the circles her uncle had moved in. "Mrs. Henderson," she said carefully, If someone came here looking for someone else, asking questions, would people in town talk? The older woman studied her with shrewd eyes. Depends on who's asking and why. We are not fond of bounty hunters or men who hit women, if that is what you are worried about. Had a fellow come through last year looking for his wife, said she stole from him. Sheriff Morgan asked around and found out the only thing she stole was herself and her 2 children away from his fists. We told him she had never been here. He left empty-handed. Relief flooded through Sarah. Thank you, that is good to know. Whatever you are running from, girl, you are safe here as long as you are honest with the right people, Mrs. Henderson patted her shoulder. Get some rest. You start teaching on Monday and Mrs. Patterson will work you hard. She's got 3 weeks of lesson plans already prepared. Sarah spent the evening unpacking her meager belongings and washing away the grime of travel. She had 2 dresses besides the one she wore, a nightgown, some undergarments, a hairbrush, a small Bible that had been her mother's, and a silver locket containing a miniature portrait of her parents. They had died of cholera when she was 16, and she had gone to live with Uncle Herbert because there was nowhere else to go. For 6 years, she had kept his house and avoided his business associates, until he had informed her that she would marry Silas Blackwood whether she liked it or not. She had met Silas Blackwood exactly once. He had looked at her the way a man might look at a horse he was considering purchasing, evaluating her teeth and her figure with cold, calculating eyes. When she had objected to the arrangement, Uncle Herbert had locked her in her room. She had climbed out the window that night with nothing but what she could carry. Sarah touched the locket at her throat, drawing comfort from its familiar weight. "I'm safe, Mama," she whispered. "I think I am finally safe." She changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, exhausted but too anxious to sleep immediately. Strange sounds filtered through the window, the sounds of a frontier town at night. Horses, distant laughter, the tinny music of a piano from the saloon, so different from St. Louis, with its cobblestone streets and gas lamps and society parties that were really just elaborate cages for women like her. Sleep finally claimed her sometime after midnight, and she dreamed of blue eyes and a calm voice saying, "Nobody's trying to kill anyone today." Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of frying bacon. For a moment she could not remember where she was, panic seizing her chest, but then memory returned and she relaxed against the pillow. Redemption Creek, Wyoming Territory. Far from Uncle Herbert and Silas Blackwood. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Mrs. Henderson serving breakfast to the other boarders, 2 miners heading north and an elderly gentleman who was apparently the town's assayer. They were polite, tipping their hats to her, and she ate her eggs and bacon with better appetite than she had felt in weeks. "Church service is at 10 if you are inclined," Mrs. Henderson said. "Reverend Michaels gives a good sermon, and it is a fine way to meet more folks." Sarah had not been to church since leaving St. Louis, afraid that stopping anywhere too long might give her pursuers time to catch up. But if she was truly staying here, truly building a new life, she needed to become part of the community. "I think I would like that." The church was small but well-attended, families filling the pews in their Sunday best. Sarah sat near the back, feeling conspicuous in her travel-worn dress, but several women smiled at her and one older lady handed her a hymnal without being asked. Reverend Michaels was a thin man with kind eyes who preached about new beginnings and second chances, and Sarah wondered if Lily had mentioned her arrival. She was so focused on the sermon that she did not notice Cole Bridger until the service ended, and people began filing out. He was sitting 3 rows ahead, his black hat resting on the pew beside him, his dark hair still damp from washing. He wore a clean shirt and a string tie, clearly his version of Sunday clothes, and when he stood and turned, his eyes found hers immediately. Sarah's breath caught. In the daylight streaming through the church windows, he was striking, all sharp angles and quiet strength. He made his way through the crowd toward her, ignoring several people who tried to catch his attention. "Miss Mitchell." He stopped in front of her, his hat now in his hands. "I heard you will be teaching at the school. That is good news for the town. Mr. Bridger." She felt oddly flustered, which was ridiculous. She had been courted by some of St. Louis's most eligible bachelors, had deflected their advances with practiced ease. But none of them had ever looked at her the way Cole Bridger was looking at her now, like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. "Thank you again for your help yesterday." It was nothing. He shifted his weight, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "I was wondering if you might like to see some of the valley this afternoon. I am heading back to my ranch and could show you the area, give you a sense of where your students live. Some of them come from pretty far out." It was a reasonable offer, practical even. So why did Sarah's heart start racing? "I would not want to impose on your Sunday. You would not be." His mouth quirked up at one corner, almost a smile. "I could use the company, truth be told. Ranch life gets lonely." Mrs. Patterson appeared at Sarah's elbow before she could respond. "Cole Bridger, are you monopolizing our new teacher already? I need to discuss the curriculum with her." "Just offering to show her around, Mrs. Patterson." Cole's almost smile became a real one, transforming his face from handsome to devastating. "Got to make sure she knows where she is going come Monday morning." Mrs. Patterson looked between them, her expression unreadable. "Well, I suppose that is practical. But you have her back before dark, you hear? People will talk." "Yes, ma'am." Cole turned back to Sarah. "What do you say, Miss Mitchell?" "I have got a wagon outside and the weather's perfect for a ride." Sarah knew she should decline. She had just arrived in town, barely knew this man and Mrs. Patterson was right that people would talk, but something in his eyes, some quiet loneliness that mirrored her own, made her nod. "I would like that, Mr. Bridger, thank you." "Cole," he said. "Just Cole is fine. Then you should call me Sarah." That earned her a full smile, and she realized she had been right yesterday. He did smile easily, and when he did, it lit up his entire face. "Sarah it is then. Let me talk to a few folks and then we can head out." He walked away to speak with Reverend Michaels, and Sarah found herself watching him go, admiring the way he moved with such easy confidence. Mrs. Patterson made a small humming sound beside her. "That man has not looked twice at a woman since he came to this town," the older woman said thoughtfully. "But he is looking at you like you hung the moon and stars. We only just met yesterday." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Sometimes that is all it takes." Mrs. Patterson patted her arm. "Cole Bridger is one of the good ones, my dear. If he is interested, you could do a lot worse. But be careful with your heart. He is the type who loves deep and forever, and that kind of love can be both a blessing and a burden." Before Sarah could figure out how to respond to that, Cole was back, offering his arm. "Ready." She took his arm, feeling the solid strength of him through the fabric of his shirt, and let him lead her outside to where a wagon waited. It was well maintained, the wood oiled and the wheels solid, pulled by two sturdy horses. Cole helped her up onto the seat with a hand that was calloused but gentle, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. "We will head west first," he said as they pulled away from the church. "Most of the ranches are in that direction, including mine. The valley runs about 15 miles before you hit the mountains, good grazing land and plenty of water from the creek." The town fell away behind them, and the landscape opened up, rolling grassland dotted with cattle and horses. The sky was an endless blue dome overhead, unmarred by the smoke and haze that always hung over St. Louis. Sarah breathed in deeply, tasting clean air and freedom. "It is beautiful here," she said softly. "It is." Cole glanced at her. "You are from back east originally?" "St. Louis, born and raised." She saw no point in lying about that much. But I wanted to change. St. Louis is a long way from Wyoming. That is a lot of change. Sarah chose her words carefully. Sometimes you need distance to truly start over. He nodded slowly, his eyes on the road ahead. I came from Ohio myself 8 years ago, had my reasons for leaving, and I have never regretted it. Wyoming is a good place for people who need a fresh start as long as you are willing to work hard. I am not afraid of hard work. I believe that. He guided the horses around a bend in the road and pointed to a large house in the distance, surrounded by outbuildings. That is the Johnson place. They have got 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. The boys are hellions, but the girl, Emmy, is sweet as pie. She will be one of your students. They continued on, Cole pointing out various ranches and homesteads, giving her the history of each family and details about the children she would be teaching. He spoke with genuine affection for his neighbors, and Sarah found herself relaxing, drawn in by his stories. He told her about the widow Thompson who ran her own spread with just her teenage son, about the Martinez family who had been in the valley since before it was officially Wyoming territory, about the challenges of ranching in a land where winter could be brutal and drought could kill your herd. "Do you have any family back in Ohio?" Sarah asked after a while. Cole's expression shuddered slightly. "Had a brother. He died in the war. My parents passed a few years later, influenza. There was nothing left for me there after that. I am sorry." She understood loss, the gaping holes it left in your life. It was a long time ago. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What about you? Any family in St. Louis?" "An uncle. We are not close." That was putting it mildly, but Sarah did not want to burden Cole with her troubles. "Not yet, maybe not ever." He did not push, which she appreciated. Instead, he pointed ahead to where a large ranch spread across a gentle rise. "That is my place." The Garrett Ranch, though some folks call it the Bridger Ranch now. I have kept the old name out of respect for Samuel. The ranch was impressive. A sprawling 2-story house with a wide porch, surrounded by corrals and barns and bunkhouses. Cattle dotted the pastures, hundreds of them from what Sarah could see, and she spotted several cowboys working near one of the barns. "Would you like to stop for a bit? I can show you around, and my cook makes excellent lemonade." Cole's voice was casual, but Sarah sensed the offer mattered to him. "I would like that very much." He drove them up to the main house and helped her down from the wagon. Up close, the ranch was even more impressive. Everything was well maintained and organized, the mark of someone who took pride in his work. Several dogs came bounding up to greet them, tails wagging furiously, and Cole crouched down to give them attention. "This is Ranger, and that is Scout, and the little one is Molly," he said, laughing as the dogs tried to lick his face. "They are supposed to be working dogs, but they are really just spoiled." Sarah smiled, charmed by the sight of this strong, quiet man being overwhelmed by affectionate dogs. She bent down to pet Molly, who immediately rolled over for a belly rub. "I think they love you." "Feelings mutual." Cole stood and whistled, and the dogs immediately sat, tongues lolling happily. "Come on, I will introduce you to my foreman, and then we can get that lemonade." The foreman turned out to be a weathered man in his 50s named Jack, who looked at Sarah with obvious curiosity but was too polite to pry. Cole gave him some instructions about moving cattle, then led Sarah into the house. The interior was surprisingly homey, with comfortable furniture and curtains on the windows. It was clearly a bachelor's residence, lacking the touches a woman would add, but it was clean and well organized. Cole led her through to the kitchen where an older Chinese man was preparing what looked like dinner. "Win, this is Miss Sarah Mitchell, the new schoolteacher." "Sarah, this is Win Chen, the best cook in Wyoming and also Lily's uncle." Win turned from the stove and bowed slightly. "Welcome, Miss Mitchell. Lily mentioned you. She says you are a nice lady." "Thank you, Mr. Chen. Your niece has been very kind to me." "Just Win is fine," he smiled, his weathered face creasing into 1,000 wrinkles. "You want lemonade, I just make fresh." They sat on the porch with their lemonade, the dogs lounging at their feet, and watched the sun move across the sky. Cole told her more about the ranch, his plans to expand the herd, the constant challenges of weather and predators and market prices. Sarah found herself fascinated not just by what he said, but by how he said it, with quiet passion and clear intelligence. "You love this life," she observed. "I do." He looked out over his land, pride evident in his face. "It is hard work, no question, but it is mine. I built this with my own hands and I know every acre of it. That means something." "It does," Sarah agreed softly. She had never owned anything of value, had always been dependent on others. The idea of having something that was truly hers, that she had earned, was intoxicating. They talked as the afternoon stretched on, and Sarah was surprised by how easy it was to talk to Cole. He listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, his words carried weight. He asked her about teaching, about what she hoped to accomplish with the children, and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. She found herself telling him things she had not planned to share, about her love of literature and history, about her frustration with how limited women's education often was, about her dreams of maybe one day opening a real school with proper books and supplies. "I think you will be good for this town," Cole said when she finally wound down. "We need people who dream big. What about you? What do you dream about?" He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the horizon. "I used to dream about just surviving, making it through another day. Then I dreamed about having my own place, being my own man. Now." He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Now I am starting to think about what comes next. A ranch is just land and cattle without people to share it with." The air between them felt suddenly charged, heavy with possibility. Sarah knew she should look away, should lighten the moment with some casual remark, but she could not. She was caught by his eyes, by the loneliness and hope she saw there. "Cole," she started, not sure what she was going to say. A cowboy came riding up fast, breaking the moment. "Boss. We have got trouble at the north pasture. Looks like someone cut the fence and some cattle got out." Cole was on his feet immediately. "How many are missing?" "Maybe 20 head, hard to say for sure." "Damn." Cole looked at Sarah apologetically. "I am sorry, I need to deal with this. Rustling has been a problem lately and I cannot let it slide." "Of course I understand." Sarah stood, trying to hide her disappointment. "You should go. Let me get someone to drive you back to town. I can drive myself if you trust me with the wagon." "I am quite capable." She had driven carriages in St. Louis, though usually with a chaperone. Cole hesitated, clearly torn between propriety and practicality. "You sure? It is about 3 miles." "I am sure. Go take care of your cattle." He called over one of the younger cowboys and gave him quick instructions to follow Sarah back to town at a distance, just to make sure she got there safely. Then he turned back to her, his hand briefly touching her arm. "Thank you for today, I enjoyed it." "So did I." More than she had expected, more than was probably wise. She drove the wagon back to town with the cowboy trailing far enough behind to be discreet, her mind whirling. In less than 24 hours, Cole Bridger had managed to slip past her carefully maintained defenses, and she was not sure how she felt about that. She had come to Redemption Creek to escape, to build a new life on her own terms, not to fall for the first handsome cowboy who smiled at her. But oh, what a smile it was. "Mrs. Henderson raised her eyebrows when Sarah returned the wagon to the livery and walked back to the boarding house, but she did not comment. Sarah went up to her room and tried to focus on preparing for her first day of teaching, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the afternoon, to the way Cole had looked at her, to the easy comfort she had felt in his presence. She was still thinking about him when she went to bed that night, and that worried her more than she wanted to admit. Monday morning arrived with clear skies and Sarah's first day of teaching. She wore her best dress, a dark blue cotton that had seen better days but was clean and pressed, and walked to the schoolhouse with her heart in her throat. She had told Mrs. Patterson she had teaching experience, which was technically true. She had tutored some of the neighborhood children in St. Louis, but this was different. This was a real job with real responsibility. The schoolhouse was a simple building on the edge of town, one large room with desks, a blackboard, and a wood stove for heat. Mrs. Patterson was already there, organizing books and papers. "Good morning, my dear. Ready for your first day?" "I think so." Sarah looked at the 15 empty desks and felt nerves flutter in her stomach. What if they do not like me? They will love you. Just be firm but fair, and remember that most of these children work hard on their family ranches. They are tired by the time they get here, so keep the lessons engaging. Mrs. Patterson handed her a roster. "I will stay for the morning to help you settle in, then you are on your own." The children began arriving shortly before 8, some on foot from town, others on horseback or driven by parents. They ranged in age from 6 to 14, a mix of boys and girls who studied Sarah with open curiosity. She recognized Emmy Johnson, a pretty girl of about 10, and several other children Cole had mentioned. "Good morning, everyone. I am Miss Mitchell and I will be your teacher." Sarah smiled at the sea of faces, trying to project confidence she did not quite feel. "I know I am new here, but I hope we can all learn together. Why don't we start by going around the room and you can each tell me your name and something you enjoy?" It was a simple exercise, but it helped break the ice. The children were shy at first, but gradually warmed up. She learned that Tommy Martinez loved horses, that Emmy Johnson wanted to be a writer, that young Billy Thompson dreamed of being a sheriff. By the time they moved into actual lessons, Sarah felt more confident, and the morning passed in a blur of reading, arithmetic, and geography. Mrs. Patterson left at noon with an approving nod, and Sarah taught her first solo lesson that afternoon, a history discussion that turned surprisingly lively when the children started arguing about whether Wyoming should become a state. She let them debate, impressed by their passion, and made a mental note to incorporate more discussions into her lesson plans. By the time 3 o'clock arrived and she dismissed the children, Sarah was exhausted but exhilarated. She had done it. Her first day as a real teacher, and it had gone well. She was cleaning the blackboard when she heard a horse outside. Through the window, she saw Cole dismounting, his black hat pulled low against the afternoon sun. Her heart did a stupid little skip that she tried to ignore. He knocked on the door frame and stepped inside, his eyes immediately finding hers. "Thought I would stop by and see how your first day went." "It went well, I think. The children are wonderful." Sarah set down the eraser, suddenly very aware of the chalk dust on her hands. "Did you recover your cattle?" "Most of them. Still missing a few, but we will keep looking." He moved further into the room, looking around with interest. "This place looks the same as when I was a student here about 100 years ago. You went to school here?" "For a few months when I first arrived. Mrs. Patterson insisted I needed to learn to read and write properly. Best thing anyone ever did for me." He picked up a book from her desk, a collection of American poetry. "You like poetry?" "I do." "I thought it might be nice to teach the children some. Poetry teaches rhythm and language in a way that straight prose does not." "Read me something." Sarah blinked, surprised. "What?" "Read me a poem. I am curious what you think they should learn." She took the book from him, very aware of how close he was standing, and flipped through the pages until she found Whitman. "This is from Song of Myself." She cleared her throat and began to read. "I celebrate myself, and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you." She read the entire section, her voice growing stronger with each line, and when she looked up, Cole was watching her with an expression that made her forget to breathe. "That is beautiful," he said quietly. "The way you read it, I mean, you make the words come alive. That is Whitman's gift, not mine. Maybe, but you are the one sharing it." He reached out and gently brushed a smudge of chalk from her cheek, his touch featherlight but burning. "I came to ask if you would like to have dinner at my ranch tomorrow night. Wynn is making his special roast beef, and I thought you might enjoy a home-cooked meal that is not boarding house food. Mrs. Henderson's cooking is fine, but Wynn's is extraordinary." Sarah knew she should say no. She had been in town less than a week, barely knew this man, and spending time alone with him at his ranch would definitely set tongues wagging. But the hopeful look in his eyes, the careful way he phrased the invitation like he was afraid she might refuse, undid her completely. "I would like that very much," she heard herself say. His smile was like sunrise. "I will pick you up at 6. He left before she could change her mind, and Sarah sank into her desk chair, wondering what she was getting herself into. She had fled one man who wanted to own her. She could not afford to let another one get too close, no matter how kind his eyes were or how her heart raced when he smiled. But maybe, just maybe, Cole Bridger was different. Maybe he was the fresh start she had been looking for. Tuesday seemed to drag on forever. Sarah taught her classes with half her mind on poetry and arithmetic, the other half counting down the hours until 6 o'clock. The children noticed her distraction, and Emmy Johnson asked if she was feeling all right. "I am fine, Emmy, just a bit tired still from the journey here." It was not entirely a lie. When 3 o'clock finally came, Sarah dismissed the children and rushed back to the boarding house to change. She only had 2 dresses suitable for dinner, and she chose the better one, a deep green cotton with a modest neckline and long sleeves. It was not fancy by St. Louis standards, but it was the best she had. She brushed her dark hair until it shone and pinned it up carefully, then studied herself in the small mirror. She looked nervous. She looked excited. She looked like a woman preparing for something that mattered. "Be careful," she told her reflection. "You cannot afford to fall for him," but her heart was not listening. Cole arrived exactly at 6, driving the same wagon from Sunday, and Sarah noticed he had also dressed up, wearing a clean shirt and a vest and a string tie. He helped her up onto the seat and they headed out of town, the evening air warm and sweet with the smell of prairie grass. "How was school today?" he asked. "Good. We read some poetry and the children seemed to enjoy it. Tommy Martinez particularly liked The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere." "That is a good one, lots of action," Cole grinned. "I was never much for the flowery romantic stuff, but give me a poem about adventure and I was all in." "What about now? Would you appreciate the flowery romantic stuff now?" He glanced at her, something heated flickering in his eyes. "Depends on who's reading it." Sarah felt herself blush and looked away, focusing on the landscape. The valley was beautiful in the evening light, everything painted gold and amber. She could see why Cole loved it here. They reached the ranch and Wynn greeted them at the door, beaming. "Miss Sarah." Come in. Dinner almost ready." The dining room was set with care, good china, and actual napkins, and Sarah realized Cole had gone to significant effort for this dinner. It touched her more than it probably should. Wynn's roast beef turned out to be as extraordinary as promised, tender and flavorful, served with roasted vegetables and fresh bread. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing as easily as it had on Sunday. Cole asked about her life in St. Louis, and Sarah told him carefully edited stories about the city, about the museums and theaters and parks, about her parents before they died. "It sounds like you miss it," Cole observed. "I miss parts of it," Sarah admitted. "I miss having access to books and culture, but I do not miss the constraints, the expectations. Women in St. Louis society are ornaments, meant to look pretty and say the right things and never, ever challenge anything. You do not strike me as someone who is good at staying quiet. I am not, which made me quite unpopular. She took a sip of wine, feeling bold. My uncle wanted me to marry a business associate, a man I found thoroughly repulsive. When I refused, he tried to force me, so I left. Cole's expression darkened. He tried to force you? Not physically, but he made it clear I had no choice in the matter, so I made my own choice. Sarah met his eyes steadily. I ran. I am not proud of it, but I could not see another option. You should be proud. Cole's voice was fierce. You chose freedom over comfort. That takes courage. Or foolishness? No, courage. He reached across the table and took her hand, his palm warm and rough against hers. I am glad you ran, Sarah, glad you ended up here. Her throat tightened with emotion. So am I. They finished dinner, and Cole took her out to the porch to watch the sunset. The sky was on fire with orange and pink and purple, the mountains dark silhouettes against the blaze of color. Sarah had never seen anything so beautiful. This is why I love it here, Cole said softly. Every evening is like this, and I never get tired of it. I can understand why. Sarah leaned against the porch railing, feeling peaceful for the first time in months. Thank you for inviting me, Cole. This has been lovely. It does not have to end yet. I was hoping you might stay a bit longer. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. I like having you here. Cole. She turned to face him, her heart hammering. I need to be honest with you. I like you more than I probably should given that we barely know each other, but I am not looking for anything complicated. I came here to build a new life, to be independent. I cannot afford to let myself get distracted. Who says it has to be a distraction? He reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Maybe I am supposed to be part of that new life. You do not know me, not really. Then let me get to know you. No pressure, no expectations, just two people spending time together. His thumb traced her cheekbone, a touch so gentle it made her ache. I have not felt this way about anyone in a very long time, Sarah. I cannot just ignore it. She should step back, should put distance between them before this went any further. But her body would not cooperate, and when Cole leaned down slowly, giving her time to move away, she did not. His lips touched hers softly, a question more than a demand, and Sarah made a small sound in the back of her throat and leaned into him. The kiss deepened, careful still but growing more urgent. Cole's arms came around her, holding her close, and Sarah's hands gripped his shoulders. She had been kissed before by proper St. Louis gentlemen who treated it like a polite transaction. This was nothing like that. This was heat and need and something that felt dangerously like belonging. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Just a bit longer. Sarah knew she should say no, should demand he take her back to town before her reputation was completely ruined. But the sun was setting, painting everything in golden light, and Cole was looking at her like she was precious, and she could not bring herself to leave. A bit longer, she agreed. They sat on the porch steps as the stars came out, Cole's arm around her shoulders, and talked about everything and nothing. He told her about his brother who died at Gettysburg, about the grief that had nearly consumed him after his parents passed. She told him about her mother's love of music, about the way her father used to read to her every night before bed. The conversation wound through joy and sorrow, hope and regret, and Sarah felt something inside her opening up, walls she had built to protect herself beginning to crumble. She did not notice how late it had gotten until she saw the moon high overhead. Oh no, what time is it? Cole checked his pocket watch. Almost midnight. Midnight, Sarah jumped to her feet. Cole, I have to get back. Mrs. Henderson is going to think something terrible happened. I will get the wagon. But he looked reluctant, like he did not want the evening to end any more than she did. They rode back to town in comfortable silence, Sarah leaning against his shoulder, both of them exhausted but content. The town was dark and quiet when they arrived, only a few lights still burning in windows. Cole helped her down from the wagon in front of the boarding house and walked her to the door. "Thank you for dinner," Sarah said softly, "and for everything else. Thank you for staying." He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and courtly that it made her smile. "Can I see you again, soon? I would like that. Thursday. I could bring you lunch at the school. That would be nice." She was smiling like a fool and could not seem to stop. "Good night, Cole. Good night, Sarah." She slipped inside and hurried up to her room, her heart racing. When she looked out the window, she could see Cole still standing by his wagon, looking up at her window. She waved, and even in the darkness she could see his smile. It was not until she was changing for bed that doubt crept in. What was she doing? She had been in Redemption Creek less than a week, and she was already falling for Cole Bridger. She should be more careful, more cautious. She should protect herself. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was his face, and all she could feel was the ghost of his kiss, and she knew it was already too late. She was falling, and she had no idea if there would be anything to catch her. The next morning brought a letter that changed everything. Sarah was having breakfast when Mrs. Henderson brought her the mail, a single envelope with a St. Louis postmark. Her blood went cold when she recognized the handwriting. "Bad news?" Mrs. Henderson asked, noticing her expression. "I am not sure yet." Sarah took the letter up to her room and opened it with shaking hands. It was from her friend Margaret, one of the few people in St. Louis she had trusted enough to tell where she was going. The letter was brief and terrifying. Uncle Herbert had hired a Pinkerton detective to find her. Silas Blackwood was furious about the broken engagement and had put up a substantial reward for her return. Margaret had heard that the detective was headed west, following the trail of stagecoach records and telegraph inquiries. "You need to be careful," Margaret wrote. "Uncle Herbert is telling everyone you stole from him that you are mentally unstable and dangerous. I know it is lies, but people believe him. Please stay safe and write to me when you can so I know you are all right." Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the letter. She had known her uncle might come looking for her, but she had hoped he would give up, decide she was not worth the trouble. The fact that he had hired a Pinkerton meant he was serious, and if Silas Blackwood was involved, there was a financial incentive beyond just family pride. She needed to run again. Redemption Creek was not safe anymore, but the thought of leaving, of abandoning the children and Mrs. Patterson and this new life she was just starting to build, made her want to weep. And Cole. The thought of leaving Cole felt like tearing out a piece of her heart. No, she could not think about that now. She needed to focus on survival. Sarah spent the day teaching in a fog, going through the motions but barely present. The children noticed something was wrong, and Emmy approached her after class with concerned eyes. "Are you all right, Miss Mitchell? You seem sad." "I am fine, Emmy, just tired." Sarah forced a smile. "Go on home now, I will see you tomorrow." But she might not. By tomorrow she might be gone. She was locking up the schoolhouse when a horse approached fast. Sarah looked up, half expecting to see some stranger claiming to be a Pinkerton, but it was just Cole. The relief that flooded through her was so intense it made her dizzy. "Sarah," he dismounted quickly, his face concerned. "I was riding past and saw you through the window. You looked upset." What is wrong? She should lie, should protect him from her problems, but the words spilled out before she could stop them. "I got a letter from St. Louis. My uncle hired a detective to find me. He is coming west." Cole went very still, his jaw tightening. "Why is your uncle so determined to drag you back? He is business partners with the man he wants me to marry." If I do not marry Silas Blackwood, their deal falls apart, and Silas is furious that I embarrassed him by running." Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. "My uncle is telling people I stole from him, that I am dangerous. If the detective finds me, he will take me back and I will have no legal recourse. Women have no rights in these situations." "Like hell he will." Cole's voice was flat and hard, nothing like his usual gentle tone. "You are not going anywhere you do not want to go. Cole, you do not understand. A Pinkerton detective has the law on his side, and my uncle has money and influence. And I have a ranch full of men who are loyal to me, a sheriff who hates Pinkertons, and a community that protects its own." Cole took her by the shoulders, his eyes blazing. "You are part of this community now, Sarah. We do not let outsiders come in and steal our people. But my reputation, the school, if people find out I am a runaway, that I am wanted." "You are not wanted, you are being hunted by a bully who thinks he can force you into marriage. There is a difference." Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Trust me, Sarah, trust us. We will keep you safe." Sarah wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly. But she knew the power men like her uncle wielded, the way they could twist the law to serve their purposes. "What if you cannot? What if he takes me back? Then I will come get you." Cole pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "I will ride to St. Louis myself if I have to. You are not alone anymore." The conviction in his voice, the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, broke something inside her. Sarah pressed her face against his chest and started to cry, all the fear and exhaustion and loneliness of the past few weeks pouring out. Cole held her through it, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances. "It is all right, I have got you, you are safe." When she finally stopped crying, embarrassed and exhausted, Cole tilted her chin up gently. "Come back to the ranch with me tonight. You will be safer there than at the boarding house, and we can figure out a plan. I cannot just disappear. Mrs. Henderson will worry, and the children. I will send someone to explain to Mrs. Henderson, and we can talk to Sheriff Morgan tomorrow about the situation, but tonight I want you where I can protect you." His thumb brushed away her tears. "Please, Sarah," she should say no. Going to his ranch overnight would destroy her reputation completely, but right now, survival mattered more than propriety. "All right." Cole lifted her onto his horse and climbed up behind her, his arms secure around her waist. They rode to the ranch at a canter, arriving as the sun was setting. Wynne took one look at Sarah's tear-stained face and immediately disappeared into the kitchen to make tea. "The guest room is upstairs, second door on the right," Cole told her. "Take some time to rest and clean up. I will have Wynne bring you something to eat." Sarah nodded numbly and went upstairs. The guest room was simple but comfortable, with a large bed and a washstand. She cleaned her face and tried to compose herself, but her mind was racing. She had dragged Cole into her problems, put him at risk. She should leave tonight, ride out before dawn and head further west where no one would think to look for her. But when she tried to imagine leaving, tried to picture herself back on a stagecoach running toward yet another unknown destination, all she felt was bone-deep weariness. She was tired of running. Tired of being afraid, she wanted to stay to fight even if it meant risking everything. There was a soft knock on the door. "Sarah, can I come in?" She opened the door to find Cole holding a tray with tea and sandwiches. He set it on the small table by the window and turned to her, his expression gentle. "You do not have to run again," he said quietly, reading her thoughts with uncanny accuracy. "Whatever happens, we will face it together. Why are you doing this? You barely know me." "Because I see you." He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I see someone brave and smart and kind, someone who deserves to be free, and because when I look at you, I see my future." Maybe that is crazy after only a week, but it is the truth. Sarah's breath caught. "Cole, I am not asking you to marry me or make any promises. I am just asking you to stay, to give this place and these people, to give me a chance to prove that you can be safe here, that you can be happy." She looked at their joined hands, at the way his rough fingers wrapped around hers so carefully. She thought about the past week, about teaching children who actually wanted to learn, about Lily and Mrs. Henderson and Wynne, about the vast open sky and the freedom she felt when she looked at the mountains. And she thought about Cole, about his steady presence and his rare smiles and the way he kissed her like she was precious. "I am scared," she whispered. "So am I." He lifted her hand and pressed it over his heart. She could feel it beating hard and fast beneath her palm. "But I think you are worth being scared for." Something inside Sarah cracked wide open, and suddenly she was kissing him, desperate and needy, pouring all her fear and hope into the press of her lips against his. Cole made a rough sound and kissed her back just as fiercely, his arms coming around her to lift her against him. They stumbled backward until Sarah's back hit the wall, and still they kissed, months of loneliness and fear melting away in the heat between them. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said again, his voice rough. "Stay until morning at least. Let me keep you safe for one night." Sarah looked into his eyes and saw everything she had ever wanted: safety, freedom, love. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely impossible to resist. "Until morning," she agreed. But even as she said it, she knew morning would not be enough. One night would not be enough. She was falling in love with Cole Bridger, and there was no going back now. They sat together in the guest room talking until late into the night, making plans. Cole wanted to consult with Sheriff Morgan first thing in the morning, get ahead of the situation before any detective arrived. He was confident the sheriff would be on their side. Wyoming Territory had a reputation for independence and a general distrust of Eastern authorities trying to impose their will. Morgan was a Union soldier, saw some terrible things in the war, Cole explained. He does not take kindly to men who abuse their power, especially when it comes to women. If you tell him your story, he will help. And if he does not believe me, if he thinks I really am a thief, then we will figure something else out, but I know Morgan, he is a good man. Cole tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture already becoming familiar. "Trust me," Sarah nodded, even though trust was hard for her. But Cole had done nothing except try to help her since the moment they met. If she could not trust him, she could not trust anyone. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with her and she started to doze, her head dropping onto Cole's shoulder. He carried her to the bed and laid her down gently, pulling the quilt over her. "Sleep," he murmured. "I will be right downstairs if you need anything. Stay," the word was out before Sarah could stop it, "just until I fall asleep." Cole hesitated, clearly torn between propriety and the desire to give her what she asked for. Finally, he sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. "I will stay until you are asleep. But then I need to go, or Wynne will lecture me about proper behavior for a week." Sarah smiled, already drifting. "Tell Wynne I insisted. I will." He watched her eyes close, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Sleep well, Sarah." She fell asleep to the warmth of his touch and the sound of his breathing, and for the first time in weeks, she did not have nightmares. Sarah woke sometime in the darkest part of the night, disoriented and afraid. For a moment she could not remember where she was, and panic seized her. Then memory returned and she sat up, reaching for the matches on the bedside table to light the lamp. The room looked different in the lamplight, shadows dancing on the walls. She could not go back to sleep, her mind too full of worries and what-ifs. What if the sheriff did not believe her? What if the Pinkerton arrived before they could come up with a plan? What if she had made a terrible mistake by staying? She got out of bed and paced to the window, looking out over the dark ranch. A light was still burning downstairs, and she wondered if Cole was having as much trouble sleeping as she was. The thought of him down there, probably worried about her, made her chest ache. She should not go down there. It was the middle of the night, and she was wearing only her nightgown, which she had packed in her carpet bag. It was improper and foolish and would only make things more complicated. But her feet were already carrying her to the door, and before she could talk herself out of it, she was descending the stairs. The light was coming from Cole's study, and she found him there sitting by the fire, a glass of whiskey in his hand and a troubled expression on his face. Sarah. He stood immediately when he saw her. "What is wrong? Did something happen?" "I could not sleep." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling exposed in just her nightgown and robe. "I kept thinking about everything that could go wrong. Come here." He held out his hand and she took it, letting him guide her to the chair next to his. He draped a blanket over her lap and handed her his glass. "Take a sip, it will help." The whiskey burned going down, but it did settle her nerves. She handed the glass back and stared into the fire. "I am sorry for dragging you into my mess." "You did not drag me anywhere. I jumped in willingly." Cole took a drink and set the glass aside. "I want to tell you something I have not told anyone else in a long time." Sarah looked at him, seeing the vulnerability in his face. "When I lost my brother in the war, I lost my best friend. We were going to come west together, build a ranch, make our fortune. When he died, I felt like I died too. I went through the motions for a few years, but I was just existing, not living." Cole stared into the fire, his voice low. "Samuel Garrett saw that in me when I showed up here looking for work. He took me in, taught me about ranching, about building something worth having. And when he died, he left me all this because he said I reminded him of himself when he was young. Lost, but looking for a purpose. He was right to see that in you. You have built something incredible here. I built a business, I built a ranch, but I was still just existing, Sarah. I had purpose but no joy, and then you walked into that saloon with glass raining down around you and something inside me woke up." He turned to look at her, his eyes intense. "I know it sounds crazy. We barely know each other, but I feel more alive when I am with you than I have felt in 8 years. Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. "I feel it too, and it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because I do not know if I can trust it. Every man I have ever known has wanted something from me. My uncle wanted me to secure his business deal. Silas Blackwood wanted a young wife to show off. Even my father, as much as I loved him, wanted me to be a perfect daughter who never caused trouble." She looked down at her hands. "How do I know you are different?" "You do not. Not yet." Cole reached over and took her hand. "But I will spend every day proving it to you if you let me. I do not want to own you, Sarah. I want to know you. I want to see you become whoever you are meant to be, and I want to be there supporting you while you do it." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she did not try to stop them. "I want to believe you." "Then believe me." He pulled her out of her chair and into his lap, holding her close. "Stay, build your school, teach those children, make a life here. And let me be part of it, whatever that looks like." Sarah buried her face in his neck, breathing in the scent of him, leather and smoke, and something uniquely Cole. She felt safe here, wrapped in his arms by the fire. She felt like she had come home. "I will stay," she whispered. "I will try." They sat like that for a long time, the fire burning low, neither wanting to move. Eventually, Cole stirred and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You should get some sleep. Morning will come early and we have a lot to do. I do not want to go back upstairs alone." Sarah. Her name was a groan, half desire and half restraint. "If you stay down here with me, I am not sure I can be a gentleman about it." She pulled back to look at him, seeing the heat in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "What if I do not want you to be a gentleman, Sarah?" His voice was strained. "You are scared and vulnerable right now. I will not take advantage of that. You are not taking advantage." "I am asking." She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. I am tired of being afraid, tired of running. I want one night where I feel alive, where I make my own choices. I choose you, Cole. I choose this. For a long moment he did not move, clearly warring with himself. Then something in his expression shifted, resolve replacing restraint. Are you sure? Because once this happens, I am not letting you go. I am sure, and she was. Maybe it was reckless, maybe she would regret it in the morning. But right now, with the fire casting shadows across his face and his arms around her, she had never been more certain of anything. Cole kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise. He stood with her in his arms and carried her up the stairs, not to the guest room but to his own. The room was masculine and sparse, dominated by a large bed, and Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness as he set her down on the edge of it. "We can stop," Cole said, kneeling in front of her so they were eye to eye. "Any time you want, we can stop." But stopping was the last thing Sarah wanted. She leaned forward and kissed him, pouring all her longing and fear and hope into it. He responded with a hunger that matched her own, his hands gentle but sure as they began to undo the ties of her robe. The night that followed was revelation. Cole was patient and thorough, mapping every inch of her with his hands and lips, learning what made her gasp and sigh. He murmured reassurances and endearments, his voice rough with desire, and when they finally came together, it was with a rightness that made Sarah's eyes sting with tears. Afterward they lay tangled together, the sheets kicked to the foot of the bed, both breathing hard. Cole pulled her close, his hand stroking her hair, and Sarah pressed her face against his chest and felt something settle inside her. This was where she belonged, with him, here. "I love you." The words slipped out unbidden, but she did not regret them. It was too soon, too fast, but it was true. Cole went still beneath her, then tilted her face up to his. His eyes were shining. "Say it again. I love you." Her voice was stronger this time, certain. "I love you too." He kissed her softly, reverently. "I have loved you since you walked into that saloon covered in broken glass and looking like you were ready to take on the world. Stay with me, Sarah, not just until morning. Forever." She knew she should be cautious, should protect her heart, but her heart was already his and there was no sense denying it. "Forever," she agreed. They made love again as dawn began to paint the sky, slower this time, savoring every touch and kiss. And when Sarah finally fell asleep in Cole's arms, she dreamed not of running but of roots growing deep, of building something permanent, of home. Morning brought reality crashing back. Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the window and Cole already up and dressed, looking at her with an expression that was equal parts tender and concerned. "We need to get you back to town before people start asking too many questions," he said gently. "And we need to talk to Sheriff Morgan." Sarah sat up, pulling the sheet around herself, and felt her cheeks warm at the intimacy of the situation. Last night had been incredible, but now she had to face the consequences. "Do you regret it?" "Not for a second." Cole crossed to the bed and kissed her, "but I also do not want your reputation destroyed. Whatever happens with your uncle and his detective, you still need to be able to hold your head up in this town. You are the school teacher." He was right, of course. Sarah dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes and tried to tame her hair into something respectable. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who looked thoroughly loved, and she could not quite regret that even though she knew it would show. Wynne had breakfast ready when they came downstairs, and if he had any opinion about Sarah's presence at dawn, he kept it to himself. They ate quickly, both anxious to get to town and deal with the situation. The ride back to Redemption Creek was quiet, both lost in thought. Cole kept her hand in his, though, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm, and that simple touch gave Sarah courage. She was not alone anymore. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Mrs. Henderson was waiting when they arrived, her expression carefully neutral. Miss Mitchell, I was worried when you did not come home last night. I am sorry, Mrs. Henderson. I received some troubling news, and Mr. Bridger thought it best that I stay at his ranch, where there were more people to keep watch. It was not entirely a lie, though it was definitely not the whole truth. The older woman's eyes moved between them, taking in their joined hands and Sarah's wrinkled dress. I see. Well, you are safe, and that is what matters. Sheriff Morgan stopped by this morning looking for you. He heard you might need to speak with him. Cole must have sent word. Sarah looked at him gratefully. Where is he now? At his office, I expect. Shall I tell him you will be by? We are heading there now. Cole nodded to Mrs. Henderson. Thank you for looking after Sarah, ma'am. They walked to the sheriff's office, and Sarah noticed several people watching them with open curiosity. By tonight, everyone in town would know she had spent the night at Cole's ranch. She should be mortified, but instead she felt oddly defiant. Let them talk. She had made her choice. Sheriff Morgan was a grizzled man in his late 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened without interrupting as Sarah explained her situation, Cole sitting beside her in silent support. When she finished, the sheriff leaned back in his chair and studied her. So your uncle is claiming you stole from him? Yes, but it is not true. I took only what was mine, the money my parents left me that he had been managing. And even that I left behind because I was afraid he would use it as an excuse to hunt me down. Sarah's hands were clenched in her lap. I just want to be left alone to live my own life. And this Silas Blackwood, he is the man your uncle wanted you to marry. Yes, a business partner. I was meant to seal some deal between them. The bitterness in her voice was evident. Morgan nodded slowly. I have dealt with Pinkertons before. They can be tenacious, but they are also pragmatic. If there is no proof of a crime, they usually move on to cases that pay better. He looked at Cole. You vouching for her character? With my life. Cole's voice was hard. Sarah is a good woman who escaped a bad situation. I will not let anyone drag her back to St. Louis against her will. Figured as much. You have got that look about you. Morgan almost smiled. All right, Miss Mitchell. Here is what we are going to do. If this Pinkerton shows up, I will handle him. I will make it clear that you are a respected member of this community, that you have committed no crimes, and that Wyoming Territory does not take kindly to men who force women into unwanted marriages. Most of these detectives are reasonable when faced with local law enforcement. He will likely send a telegram to your uncle saying you cannot be found and collect his fee. And if he does not? Sarah asked. Then we will cross that bridge when we come to it, but I have got 20 good men in this town who will back me up if needed. You are under my protection now, Miss Mitchell. You and anyone who matters to you. His eyes flicked meaningfully to Cole. Relief flooded through Sarah so intensely she felt dizzy. Thank you, Sheriff. I cannot tell you what this means to me. Just doing my job, ma'am. Now you should get on with your day. I understand you have students waiting. He stood and walked them to the door. And Miss Mitchell, welcome to Redemption Creek. We are glad to have you. Sarah taught her classes that day with a lighter heart, though she could not quite shake the nervousness. The Pinkerton could arrive at any time, and despite Sheriff Morgan's reassurances, she knew things could still go terribly wrong. But the children were a wonderful distraction, eager and engaged, and by the time 3 o'clock arrived, she felt almost normal. Cole was waiting for her outside the schoolhouse again, and this time he did not hesitate to pull her into his arms and kiss her soundly. Several people passing by saw them, and Sarah heard a woman gasp, but she did not care. She kissed him back with equal fervor, claiming him as publicly as he was claiming her. Marry me. Cole set it against her lips, his voice low and urgent. I know it is fast, I know we should wait, but marry me anyway. Let me make you my wife so no one can ever question your right to be here. Sarah pulled back to look at him, her heart racing. Cole, that is crazy. Maybe, but it is also the smartest thing I have ever thought of. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you. I want to spend my life with you, and if being married to me means that Pinkerton has no legal ground to stand on, then I say we get married tomorrow. Tomorrow, Sarah felt like she was spinning. Unless you need more time, I do not want to pressure you. Did she need more time? A week ago the answer would have been yes, but everything had changed. She had changed. And the thought of being Cole's wife, of having that legal and emotional protection, of building a life with him, felt like the rightest thing in the world. Yes. The word came out breathless but certain. Yes, I will marry you. Cole's whoop of joy was so loud it startled the horses tied up outside the general store. He spun her in a circle, both of them laughing, and when he set her down, he kissed her again, long and deep and full of promise. Tomorrow, he repeated, I will talk to Reverend Michaels tonight. We will keep it simple, just a few witnesses, but it will be legal and binding. Tomorrow, Sarah agreed and felt joy bubble up inside her like champagne. They told Mrs. Henderson first, and the older woman's eyes filled with tears. Oh, my dear, I am so happy for you. Cole is a good man and you deserve happiness. She hugged Sarah tightly. We will need to get you a proper dress. I have one that might fit with some alterations. It was my wedding dress and I would be honored if you wore it. Lily was equally thrilled, insisting on hosting a small reception at the saloon after the ceremony. Nothing fancy, just food and drink and a chance for people to celebrate with you. Please let me do this. Mrs. Patterson cried when she heard the news, clutching Sarah's hands. I am losing my teacher already. No, I will keep teaching. Sarah squeezed her hands. Cole's ranch is only 3 miles from town. I can ride in every morning. Well, in that case, I suppose I can forgive you for marrying that handsome devil. Mrs. Patterson smiled through her tears. You will be happy, dear. I can see it in how he looks at you. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparations. Mrs. Henderson altered her wedding dress, a simple but elegant ivory gown with lace at the collar and cuffs. Lily enlisted Wynn's help in preparing food for the reception. Cole rode out to his ranch to make arrangements, promising to return for dinner. Sarah should have been terrified. She was marrying a man she had known for less than 2 weeks, appending all her carefully laid plans for independence. But every time doubt crept in, she remembered the feel of his arms around her, the way he looked at her like she was precious, the fierce protectiveness in his voice when he promised to keep her safe. This was not giving up her freedom. This was choosing to share her life with someone who respected her, who wanted her to thrive. That evening, Cole took her out to the church to meet with Reverend Michaels. The minister was delighted by the news and agreed to perform the ceremony the next afternoon. I know it is quick, but I have seen enough in my years to know when 2 people are meant for each other. You have my blessing. They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, the evening air sweet and cool. Are you having second thoughts? Cole asked. No, are you? Not a one. He stopped and turned to face her. I just want to make sure you know what you are getting into. Being a rancher's wife is hard work. The hours are long, the land is unforgiving, and there will be times when I am gone for days dealing with the herd. It is not an easy life. I am not looking for easy, Cole. I am looking for real. For something I built with my own hands, or in this case with you. Sarah smiled up at him. Besides, I am tougher than I look. I know you are, he kissed her softly. Get some sleep tonight. Tomorrow you become Mrs. Cole Bridger. Sarah did not sleep much that night, too excited and nervous and happy. She kept touching Mrs. Henderson's wedding dress where it hung in her room, unable to believe that tomorrow she would wear it, that tomorrow she would marry Cole. A week ago she had been alone and terrified, and now she was surrounded by people who cared about her, about to marry a man she loved desperately. Life could change so fast, she realized. One moment you were running, and the next you were choosing to stay, to put down roots, to build something permanent. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Sarah woke early and spent time carefully preparing, washing her hair and pinning it up in an elegant style with some help from Mrs. Henderson. The wedding dress fit perfectly after the alterations, and when Sarah looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked happy. She looked like a bride. Lily arrived with a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked that morning. "You look beautiful," she said, tears in her eyes. "Cole is not going to know what hit him." The ceremony was set for 2 o'clock, and by 1:30, Sarah was a bundle of nerves. What if Cole had changed his mind? What if he realized how crazy this was? What if the Pinkertons showed up in the middle of the ceremony? But when she walked into the church on Mrs. Henderson's arm at precisely 2 o'clock, all her fears evaporated. Cole was standing at the altar in a new suit, his hair neatly combed and his face clean-shaven, and when he saw her, his expression transformed into something so full of love and awe that Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. The church was full. It seemed like half the town had come to witness the wedding. Sarah saw Mrs. Patterson and Lily and Wynne, saw Sheriff Morgan and several ranchers she had met, saw the Johnson family and Tommy Martinez's parents and so many friendly faces. These were her people now, her community, and they had all come to celebrate with her. Reverend Michaels performed the ceremony with warmth and humor, and when it came time for vows, Cole took her hands and looked into her eyes. "I promise to love you, to protect you, to support your dreams and help you build the life you want. I promise to be your partner in all things, your shelter in the storm, your home. I promise to make you laugh, to keep you safe, and to remind you every day how precious you are. This I swear before God and these witnesses." Sarah's voice shook as she repeated her own vows, promising to love and honor him, to build a life together, to face whatever challenges came with courage and faith. And when Reverend Michaels pronounced them husband and wife and told Cole he could kiss his bride, the kiss they shared was sweet and full of promise. The reception at Lily's saloon was joyous and loud, full of music and laughter. People came up to congratulate them, to shake Cole's hand and kiss Sarah's cheek. She danced with her new husband, feeling like she was floating, and when the sun began to set and it was time to leave, she was sad to see the day end. Cole drove them back to the ranch in his wagon, now decorated with ribbons and cans that clanked merrily. Sarah leaned against his shoulder, exhausted but happier than she could remember being in years. "Hello, Mrs. Bridger," Cole said softly. "Hello, Mr. Bridger." Sarah smiled up at him. "Thank you for today, it was perfect. It is just the beginning." He kissed the top of her head. "We have got a whole lifetime ahead of us." Wynne had made himself scarce when they arrived at the ranch, leaving a note that he was spending the night in town. The house was quiet and lit with candles, and Cole carried Sarah over the threshold with a grin. "Welcome home," he said, setting her down gently. Sarah looked around the house that was now hers, feeling a rush of emotion. "It still does not quite feel real." "Then let me make it real." Cole pulled her close and kissed her deeply, and Sarah melted into him, all the tension and fear of the past weeks finally releasing. She was safe. She was loved. She was home. They made love that night as husband and wife, taking their time to explore and savor, and afterward they lay tangled together, talking about the future. Cole wanted to expand the ranch, maybe buy some of the adjacent land. Sarah wanted to add more books to the school, maybe start an adult reading program for people who had never learned properly. They made plans and dreamed dreams, and Sarah felt her heart expand with possibility. "I love you," she whispered as sleep began to claim her. "I love you too." Cole's arms tightened around her. "Sleep well, wife." Sarah slept better than she had in months, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The Pinkerton detective arrived 3 days after the wedding. Sarah was at school when Sheriff Morgan came to find her, his expression carefully neutral. "He is at my office asking questions. I thought you should know." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Did you tell him I was here?" "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first, figure out how you want to handle this." Morgan studied her. "You are a married woman now, which gives you some legal protection. But I want to know what you are comfortable with." Sarah thought about running, about asking Cole to take her further west where no one would find her. But she was tired of running, tired of letting her uncle control her life even from 1,000 miles away. "I will talk to him, but only with you and Cole present." "That is what I was hoping you would say." Morgan nodded approvingly. "Finish up here and come to my office when you are ready. I will send word to Cole." The rest of the school day passed in a fog. Sarah went through the motions of teaching, but her mind was on the confrontation ahead. When 3 o'clock came, she dismissed the children and walked slowly toward the sheriff's office, each step feeling like it carried more weight than the last. Cole was already there when she arrived, his face grim. He pulled her into his arms the moment he saw her. "It is going to be all right," he murmured. "I am right here." They entered the office together to find a thin man in a suit sitting across from Sheriff Morgan's desk. He stood when they entered, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. "Miss Mitchell, I presume." His voice was cold and professional. "Mrs. Bridger, actually?" Sarah lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. "I married 3 days ago." The detective's eyebrows rose. "How convenient." "Your uncle will be interested to hear that." "My uncle has no say in my life anymore. I am a grown woman and a married one. I have broken no laws and I owe him nothing." "He claims you stole a significant sum of money from him." "He is lying. The money was mine, an inheritance from my parents, and I left it behind when I fled to avoid exactly this accusation." Sarah could feel her anger rising, burning away the fear. "My uncle tried to force me into a marriage I did not want to a man I found repulsive, solely for his business benefit. I refused and left." "That is not a crime." The detective pulled out a notebook. "Nevertheless, your uncle has filed legal papers stating that you are mentally unstable and require his guardianship. He has requested your return to St. Louis for medical evaluation." "That is absurd." Cole's voice was dangerous. "My wife is perfectly sound of mind." "I am merely relaying what I was hired to do, Mr. Bridger." The detective's tone was indifferent. "I am supposed to return Miss Mitchell to her legal guardian." "She is not Miss Mitchell anymore. She is Mrs. Bridger, and I am her legal guardian now under territorial law." Sheriff Morgan leaned forward, his expression hard. "You have no authority here, detective. This is Wyoming territory, not Missouri, and we do not recognize claims of mental instability without proper medical evaluation by local authorities. Dr. Shaw has examined Mrs. Bridger and found her to be in perfect health, both mentally and physically." Sarah blinked. "Dr. Shaw had done no such thing, but apparently Sheriff Morgan was willing to bend the truth to protect her." The detective frowned. "I will need to see documentation of that. And I will provide it, along with a statement from Reverend Michaels, Mrs. Patterson, and a dozen other upstanding citizens who will testify to Mrs. Bridger's good character and sound mind." Morgan stood, his presence intimidating despite his age. "You can waste your time trying to build a case, or you can return to your employer and tell him that his niece is legally married and beyond his reach." "Your choice, but I should mention that my town does not take kindly to men who harass our women folk. It would be a shame if your stay here became unpleasant." The threat was subtle but clear. The detective studied them for a long moment, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he sighed and put away his notebook. "I will report what I found to Mr. Herbert, but I should warn you, Mrs. Bridger, that your uncle is a determined man. This may not be the end of it. Then let him come himself if he is so concerned." Sarah's voice was steady despite the fear coiling in her gut. "I will tell him to his face what I told you. I am done being controlled. I am building a new life here, and I will not let him destroy it." The detective tipped his hat. "As you wish. Good day." He left without another word, and Sarah sagged against Cole in relief. "Is it really over?" she asked. "For now." Sheriff Morgan sat back down, looking tired. "He will send a report to your uncle, and hopefully that will be the end of it. Most men give up when faced with this much resistance. But you should be prepared for the possibility that your uncle might try something else. Let him try." Cole's arm was tight around Sarah. "He will find that Western folks are not as easy to push around as Eastern society types." They left the sheriff's office and walked back through town, Sarah's mind reeling. She had faced her past and survived. The Pinkerton had been turned away, and she was still here, still free. It felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "You were amazing in there," Cole said as they reached the livery where his horse was waiting. "So strong and brave." "I did not feel brave, I was terrified." "Bravery is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite it." He helped her onto the horse and climbed up behind her. "I am proud of you." Sarah leaned back against his chest as they rode toward the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the valley stretched out before them in all its wild beauty. This was her home now, this land, this man, this life, and she would fight to keep it. Over the next few weeks, Sarah settled into her new life as a rancher's wife and schoolteacher. She woke before dawn to make breakfast for Cole and any ranch hands who were staying at the main house, then rode into town to teach her classes. In the afternoons, she returned to the ranch to help with whatever needed doing, whether it was mending fences, tending the garden Wynn had started, or working on the ranch's accounts. The work was hard, but it was satisfying in a way her old life in St. Louis had never been. Cole was a wonderful husband, attentive and affectionate and supportive of her teaching. He never complained when she stayed up late preparing lessons, or when she invited students' families to the ranch for dinners so she could discuss their children's progress. He built her a small office where she could work in peace, with shelves for books and a desk positioned to catch the morning light. The community embraced her fully once she was Cole's wife. Women who had been cautiously friendly became warm and welcoming, inviting her to quilting circles and church socials. Men tipped their hats when she passed and asked her advice about their children's education. She felt like she belonged in a way she never had in St. Louis, where she had always been an outsider in her uncle's world. Lily became her closest friend, riding out to the ranch several times a week to visit. They would sit on the porch drinking lemonade and talking about everything and nothing. Lily confided that she was developing feelings for one of Cole's ranch hands, a quiet cowboy named Ben, and Sarah encouraged her to pursue it. "Life is too short to waste on caution," Sarah said. "If you care about him, let him know." "Is that what you did with Cole, just threw caution to the wind?" Sarah thought about it. "Yes and no, I was cautious, probably too cautious. But Cole was persistent, and eventually I realized that being safe and alone was not actually living. So yes, I threw caution to the wind, and it was the best decision I ever made." Mrs. Patterson proved to be an invaluable resource for teaching, sharing years of accumulated wisdom and curriculum materials. She came to dinner at the ranch once a week, and Sarah cherished those evenings, learning from the older woman's experience and soaking up her stories about the town's history. "You are a natural teacher," Mrs. Patterson told her one evening. "Better than I ever was, if I am honest. These children are lucky to have you." "I am the lucky one. They have given me purpose." Sarah smiled. "I never knew teaching could be so fulfilling." "That is because you are doing more than teaching them their letters and numbers. You are showing them possibilities, opening up worlds they never knew existed." Mrs. Patterson patted her hand. "That is a gift, my dear. Not everything was perfect, of course." There were hard days when Sarah missed her parents desperately, when she wondered if she had made the right choice in running. There were nights when she woke from nightmares about Silas Blackwood finding her, about being dragged back to St. Louis in chains. But Cole was always there to comfort her, to remind her that she was safe, that she was loved. And slowly the nightmares became less frequent. The fear receded. Sarah began to believe, truly believe, that she had escaped, that this life was real and permanent. 3 months after the wedding, Sarah realized she was pregnant. She had been feeling ill in the mornings, exhausted by midday, and her monthly courses had stopped. At first she tried to deny it, to convince herself it was just stress or a change in diet, but eventually she rode into town to see Dr. Shaw. The doctor confirmed what she already knew. "You are about 8 weeks along, I would guess. Congratulations, Mrs. Bridger." Sarah sat in stunned silence, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. A baby. She was going to have Cole's baby. The thought filled her with equal parts joy and terror. "Is something wrong?" Dr. Shaw asked gently. "No, I did not expect it to happen so quickly." Sarah tried to gather her thoughts. "Is everything all right? Am I healthy?" "You are in excellent health. Just make sure you are eating well and getting enough rest. Come see me once a month and we will keep an eye on things." He smiled kindly. "Try not to worry too much. Having a baby is a natural thing, and you have a good husband who will take care of you." Sarah rode back to the ranch in a daze, unsure how to feel. She had always wanted children someday, but she had imagined it happening years in the future, after she and Cole had been married for a while, after she had established herself more firmly as a teacher. Now everything was going to change, and much faster than she had anticipated. Cole was in the barn when she arrived, and she found him brushing down one of the horses. He took one look at her face and dropped the brush, concern flooding his features. "What is wrong? Did something happen in town?" "I saw Dr. Shaw." Sarah took a deep breath. "Cole, I am pregnant." For a moment he just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then his face split into the biggest smile she had ever seen, and he let out a whoop that startled the horse. He picked Sarah up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are having a baby, Sarah, we are having a baby." His happiness was contagious, and Sarah found herself laughing too, her fears melting away. "You are not upset, I know it is soon." "Upset? Are you kidding? This is the best news I have ever gotten." He set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "I love you and I love our baby already. We are going to be a family." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. "I am scared. What if I am not a good mother? What if something goes wrong? Then we will figure it out together." Cole kissed her forehead. "You are going to be an amazing mother, Sarah. Look at how you are with your students. You are patient and kind and you believe in them. Our child will be so lucky to have you." They told Wynne first, and the old cook's face lit up with joy. He immediately started planning meals to keep Sarah healthy and strong, listing off all the foods she would need to eat. They told Lily next, who squealed so loudly she startled customers in the saloon, and Mrs. Patterson, who cried happy tears and hugged Sarah tightly. "A baby," she whispered. "How wonderful. This town needs more children, more life." The news spread through Redemption Creek like wildfire, and suddenly everyone had advice for Sarah about pregnancy and childbirth. The women rallied around her, sharing their own experiences and offering support. Several started knitting baby clothes, and Mrs. Henderson declared she would make a quilt for the nursery. Sarah was overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and support. These people, who had been strangers just a few months ago, had become her family. They cared about her and Cole and their unborn child, wanted to help and celebrate and be part of their lives. It was everything she had never known she needed. As her pregnancy progressed, Sarah had to make adjustments. She continued teaching until she was 6 months along, but by then she was too exhausted to ride back and forth to town every day. She arranged with Mrs. Patterson to take over until after the baby was born, though it broke her heart to step away from her students. "You will be back," Mrs. Patterson assured her. "Babies grow up fast, and before you know it, you will be ready to return. The school will be here waiting." Sarah spent her last months of pregnancy preparing the nursery, with Cole doing the heavy lifting while she directed. They painted the room a soft yellow and set up a cradle that Cole had built himself, his hands careful and precise as he sanded and polished the wood. He was going to be such a good father, Sarah thought as she watched him work, patient and kind and devoted. Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow and bitter cold. Sarah spent most of her time inside by the fire, reading or knitting or planning lessons for when she could return to teaching. Cole was often out with the ranch hands, making sure the cattle survived the harsh weather, but he always came home to her at night, cold and exhausted but smiling. "How are you feeling?" he would ask, his hands going immediately to her swollen belly. "Tired, ready to meet this baby," Sarah would lean into him, drawing comfort from his warmth. "I am glad you are home. Always. No matter how far I have to ride or how cold it gets, I will always come home to you." The baby came on a snowy January night, 3 weeks before Dr. Shaw had predicted. Sarah's labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours, and there were moments when she was certain she was going to die. But Cole never left her side, holding her hand and whispering encouragement, and Dr. Shaw was calm and capable, guiding her through each contraction. When she finally heard the baby's first cry, thin and strong, Sarah burst into tears of relief and joy. Dr. Shaw laid the baby on her chest, and Sarah looked down into the tiny, perfect face of her son. "A boy," she whispered, tracing his features with a trembling finger. "Cole, we have a son." Cole was crying too, unashamed tears streaming down his face as he stared at their child in wonder. "He is perfect. Sarah, he is perfect." They named him Daniel, after Cole's brother, and he had his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. He was beautiful and demanding and utterly exhausting, and Sarah had never been happier in her life. The community celebrated Daniel's birth with the same enthusiasm they had shown for the wedding. People brought food and gifts, offered to help with chores so Sarah could rest, and cooed over the baby with genuine affection. Lily declared herself his honorary aunt and visited almost daily, and Wynne spent hours rocking Daniel to sleep while singing soft Chinese lullabies. Being a mother was harder than Sarah had anticipated. She was tired all the time, overwhelmed by the responsibility of keeping this tiny human alive. But Cole was an equal partner, getting up in the night to change diapers, walking Daniel around the house when he was fussy, taking over household tasks so Sarah could rest. They stumbled through those early months together, learning as they went, and somehow they survived. As winter gave way to spring, Sarah began to feel more like herself. Daniel was sleeping for longer stretches, and she was regaining her energy. She started thinking about returning to teaching, missing her students and the intellectual stimulation of the classroom. "Are you sure you are ready?" Cole asked when she mentioned it. "There is no rush, the school can wait." "I am sure. I love being Daniel's mother, but I need more. I need to use my mind to feel like I am contributing to the community." Sarah looked at her husband hopefully. "Mrs. Patterson said she would be happy to watch Daniel during school hours if we brought him to town, and if he needs me, I am only a few minutes away." Cole nodded slowly. "If that is what you want, then we will make it work. I just want you to be happy." "I am happy, happier than I ever thought possible." Sarah kissed him softly. "Thank you for understanding." She returned to teaching when Daniel was 3 months old, and it was like coming home. The children were thrilled to have her back, and they were endlessly fascinated by the baby, asking if they could hold him and peppering her with questions about babies in general. Sarah found a rhythm that worked, teaching during the day and being a mother in the evenings and on weekends. Life settled into a comfortable pattern. The ranch prospered under Cole's management, the herd growing each year. Sarah's school gained a reputation for excellence, and families from further out began sending their children to Redemption Creek specifically so she could teach them. Daniel grew from a tiny baby into a curious toddler, exploring everything with fearless enthusiasm. When Daniel was 2 years old, Sarah realized she was pregnant again. This time she was not as shocked, and the pregnancy was easier than the first. She taught until she was 7 months along, then took a few months off to prepare for the new baby's arrival. Their daughter was born on a warm June evening, arriving so fast that Dr. Shaw barely made it in time. She had Sarah's dark eyes and Cole's smile, and they named her Emma after Cole's mother. Daniel was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to touch her constantly and asking endless questions about when she would be big enough to play with him. "She is perfect," Cole said, holding Emma while Daniel sat on his lap looking at her. "We make beautiful children, Sarah. We do." Sarah watched her family with contentment. This was everything she had never dared to dream of when she fled St. Louis. A husband who loved her, children who filled her heart, a community that supported her, work that fulfilled her. She had built a life here, a real life, and it was beautiful. The years passed in a blur of school years and ranching seasons, of children growing and love deepening. Sarah never heard from her uncle again, though occasionally she wondered what had happened after the Pinkertons' report. She liked to imagine that Herbert had given up, found some other poor woman to force into marriage with Silas Blackwood, but she knew it was more likely that Cole's obvious protectiveness and the town's support had simply made her too much trouble to pursue. It did not matter anymore. That life, that fear, felt like it belonged to someone else. She was Sarah Bridger now, wife and mother and teacher, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. Daniel grew into a serious boy who loved books as much as his mother, often sitting in her classroom after school to read while she prepared lessons. Emma was her father's daughter, fearless and adventurous, spending every moment she could outside with the horses and dogs. They were so different, but they adored each other, and Sarah loved watching them grow and learn and become their own people. When Daniel was 6 and Emma was 4, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise that made Cole laugh with delight. "I guess we are not done yet," he said, his hand on her belly. This pregnancy was the hardest, and Sarah was sick for months. She had to take a full year off from teaching, which frustrated her, but Cole and the children rallied around her. Daniel helped care for Emma, and Cole hired a woman from town to help with household tasks. They all worked together to keep things running smoothly. Their second son was born in late winter, a tiny baby who came early and scared them all. But he was a fighter, growing stronger each day, and they named him Samuel after the man who had given Cole his start. He had red hair, a surprise since neither Sarah nor Cole were redheads, but Dr. Shaw assured them it sometimes happened with genetic combinations. "We have got a full house now," Cole said one evening, looking at their 3 children playing together in the living room. Daniel was reading to Emma and Samuel, his voice patient even when they interrupted with questions. "Our family is complete." "Is it?" Sarah teased. "You said that after Daniel and then Emma arrived." "3 is enough. You have given me everything I could ever want, Sarah. 3 healthy children, a good life, I could not ask for more." Sarah leaned against him, feeling the truth of his words. They had built something remarkable together, a family and a life full of love and purpose. She had run from St. Louis expecting nothing more than survival, and she had found everything instead. As the children grew older, Sarah returned to teaching full-time, and it brought her immense satisfaction to see some of her original students graduating and moving on to higher education or successful careers. Tommy Martinez became a veterinarian, traveling to Denver for training and returning to serve the ranching community. Emmy Johnson became a writer, publishing stories in Eastern magazines and always crediting Miss Mitchell, now Mrs. Bridger, as her inspiration. Daniel followed in his mother's footsteps, showing a natural aptitude for teaching. When he was 18, he announced that he wanted to attend normal school and become a teacher himself, maybe even return to Redemption Creek to help his mother with the growing student population. Sarah could not have been prouder. Emma, true to form, declared at 16 that she was going to run the ranch with her father, that she had no interest in Eastern finishing schools or polite society. Cole beamed with pride and began teaching her everything he knew about cattle and land management and business. Samuel, the surprise baby, turned out to have a gift for music. He taught himself to play the piano in the church, and the guitar Wynn gave him, and by the time he was 12, he was performing at town events. He talked about going to San Francisco to study music properly, and though the idea of him leaving made Sarah's heart ache, she knew she would support whatever dream he chose to pursue. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the largest and most successful in Wyoming. Cole expanded their holdings, buying adjacent land and increasing the herd. He hired more hands and built additional bunkhouses, and the Bridger Ranch became known for fair treatment of workers and quality cattle. Cole's reputation as an honest and capable rancher spread throughout the territory, and he was elected to the territorial legislature when Wyoming was moving toward statehood. Sarah watched her husband navigate the political world with the same steady competence he brought to everything else. He fought for education funding, for women's rights, for fair treatment of all people regardless of race or background. When Wyoming became the 44th state in 1890, Cole was there to witness it, and Sarah stood beside him with pride. They celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a party that seemed to include half the state. The ranch was filled with friends and neighbors, with former students and their families, with the people who had become their community over 2 decades. Lily and Ben, who had married 5 years after Sarah and Cole, brought their own children. Mrs. Patterson, now 93 and still sharp as a tack, gave a speech about how Sarah had transformed education in Redemption Creek. Wynn, now in his 70s but still cooking, prepared a feast that people talked about for months. 20 years, Cole said as they danced together under the stars, the party still going strong around them. Hard to believe it has been that long. And that it started with me trying to run away from you. Sarah smiled at the memory. She had been so scared that first night at his ranch, so certain that staying was a mistake. You asked me to stay until morning, remember? How could I forget? Best decision I ever made. Cole pulled her closer. And you stayed a lot longer than morning. I am still here. I am not going anywhere. Good, because I am not done with you yet. He kissed her softly, a kiss that still made her heart race even after 20 years. I love you, Sarah Bridger. More now than I did on our wedding day, which I did not think was possible. I love you too. Sarah rested her head on his shoulder, swaying to the music. Thank you for convincing me to stay. Thank you for taking a chance on me, on us, on this life. Cole's arms tightened around her. You made all of this possible, the ranch, the family, everything. You are my home, Sarah. You always will be. They danced until late into the night, surrounded by love and laughter, and Sarah felt her heart overflow with gratitude. She had run from St. Louis expecting nothing, hoping only to survive. Instead, she had found everything she never knew she needed. A partner who respected her, children who filled her life with joy, work that gave her purpose, and a community that embraced her fully. She had found home, and it was more beautiful than any dream she could have imagined. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges but also deep satisfaction. Daniel graduated from normal school and returned to Redemption Creek, opening a second schoolhouse to handle the growing number of students. He married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch, and they gave Sarah and Cole their first grandchildren, twin boys who were as mischievous as their Aunt Emma had been. Emma took over more and more of the ranch management as Cole got older, proving herself just as capable as her father. She never married, declaring that the ranch was her true love, and Sarah and Cole supported her choice even though it raised eyebrows in some circles. Emma did not care what people thought, and Sarah admired her daughter's fierce independence, seeing in her the woman she herself had become. Samuel left for San Francisco when he was 18, and though Sarah missed him terribly, she was thrilled when he was accepted to study at the conservatory. He wrote long letters home describing his studies and the vibrant music scene, and he returned every summer to perform for the community that had nurtured his talent. Cole's health began to decline when he was in his late 50s, his joints aching from years of hard ranch work. He stepped back from the day-to-day operations, letting Emma take the lead, but he still rode out every morning to check on the cattle. "The day I stop riding is the day they can bury me," he said, and Sarah knew better than to argue. Sarah continued teaching into her 60s, finally retiring when her hands became too arthritic to write on the blackboard easily. Daniel took over her classroom, and she spent her days reading, writing letters to former students scattered across the country, and spoiling her growing number of grandchildren. She and Cole would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the valley, holding hands and talking about their life together. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked one evening. "Leaving St. Louis, giving up that life?" "Not for a single second." Sarah squeezed his hand. "That was not living, Cole. This is living. Every moment with you, with our children in this place, it has been a gift. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. They taught us what we were capable of, how strong we could be together." She looked at him, this man who had saved her in so many ways. His hair was white now, his face deeply lined, but his eyes were still the same brilliant blue that had caught her attention that first day in the saloon. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "So would I." Cole lifted her hand and kissed it, the gesture as courtly now as it had been 40 years ago. "You are still the best thing that ever happened to me, Sarah Bridger." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out, and Sarah felt peace settle over her like a blanket. She had lived a good life, a full life. She had loved and been loved, had built something lasting and meaningful. When the time came to leave this world, she would have no regrets. Cole passed away quietly in his sleep on a spring morning when he was 68 years old, with Sarah beside him holding his hand. The entire community turned out for his funeral, people traveling from across Wyoming to pay their respects to a man who had been a pillar of Redemption Creek for over 40 years. Sarah stood between her children at the graveside, dry-eyed and dignified, and listened to the stories people told about her husband's generosity, his fairness, his quiet strength. "He was one of the good ones," Sheriff Morgan's son, who had taken over as sheriff when his father retired, said to Sarah after the service. "We will not see his like again." "No," Sarah agreed softly, "we will not." The months after Cole's death were difficult. Sarah had been with him for more than 40 years, and his absence left a gaping hole in her life. But she was not alone. Her children rallied around her, making sure she was never isolated for too long. Her grandchildren visited constantly, filling the house with noise and life. And the community that she and Cole had been part of for so long surrounded her with love and support. Sarah lived another 5 years after Cole's death, years spent writing her memoir, traveling to visit Samuel in San Francisco, and watching her grandchildren grow. She saw Daniel's twins graduate and head off to university, saw Emma modernize the ranch with new techniques and technologies, saw Samuel perform at Carnegie Hall in New York City. She died peacefully at 73, sitting in her favorite chair on the porch watching the sunset. Emma found her there, a slight smile on her face, her hand resting over her heart where she still wore the locket with her parents' portrait. They buried her next to Cole under the wide Wyoming sky, and half the state came to the funeral. Former students, now middle-aged with children of their own, spoke about how she had changed their lives. Neighbors talked about her kindness and strength. Her children stood together and shared stories about a mother who had taught them to be brave, to work hard, to love deeply, and to never let anyone tell them who they could or could not be. She ran away from a life that was killing her spirit, Daniel said in his eulogy. And she ran toward a future she could not even imagine. She built a life here on her own terms, with our father by her side, and she taught all of us what it means to be truly free. We are who we are because of her courage, because she chose to stay that first morning when it would have been easier to keep running. The story of Sarah and Cole Bridger became legend in Redemption Creek, passed down through generations. People told their children about the frightened young woman who arrived on a stagecoach in 1876, about the cowboy who saw her potential and loved her fiercely, about how they built a life and a family and a legacy that endured. The ranch still bore the Bridger name generations later, still thriving under the management of their descendants. The school in town had a plaque honoring Sarah's 40 years of service, and scholarships were given annually in her name to students pursuing education. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light was just right, people claimed they could see two figures on the porch of the old Bridger ranch house, sitting close together and watching the sunset, hands intertwined. Whether it was ghosts or just shadows and wishful thinking, no one could say for certain. But everyone agreed that if Sarah and Cole's spirits did linger in the place they loved, they would be together, as they had been from that first morning when she stayed instead of running, and every morning after for the rest of their lives. Their love story was the kind that people dreamed about, the kind that proved that sometimes the best things came from the bravest choices, that home was not a place but a person, and that love could bloom even in the most unlikely circumstances. Sarah Mitchell had fled St. Louis expecting nothing more than survival, and instead she found everything worth living for. She found Cole, she found herself, and she found a love that lasted long beyond their time on Earth. And it all started because one scared young woman tried to leave in the middle of the night, and one lonely cowboy asked her to stay until morning at least. That single choice, that moment of courage from both of them, changed everything. It gave them a lifetime together, a family that spanned generations, and a love story that would be told for 100 years and more. In the end, that is what mattered. Not the fear or the running or the struggles, but the love. The deep, abiding, transformative love that turned two lonely souls into a family, a house into a home, and a moment of desperation into a lifetime of joy. Sarah and Cole Bridger's love was the kind that built legacies, the kind that made the world a little bit better, the kind that reminded everyone who heard their story that taking a chance on love was always worth it. And somewhere in the vast Wyoming sky, under stars that had witnessed their vows and their life together, their spirits remained intertwined, proof that some loves truly do last forever.